That's the most important. And went through a little bit of the different sukkim, different verses in Tanakh, because in the books of the Tanakh of the prophets, that's where you find it very openly, very explicitly. We went through where it's in the Chumash and the Parsha Bilam. And now we're going to go to Gemara. And as you know, Gemara, which is the Talmud, is made up of different tractates. In fact, altogether there are 60 tractates. And that's why it's called Shas. Shas is spelled Shin Samach. The Shin stands for the word Shishim, which means 60. And Samach Sidorim. I'll write it down if you want. Which means 60 volumes make up the Shas. This is the way it's spelled. Shin and Samach. Means it's an acronym for two words. This means 60. And this word stands for, I guess, volumes. Sidorim. So one of them is Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin, this is the highest court of rabbis, the highest level of authority. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they were situated in the Beis Hamikdash, and there were 71 sages. This is always the greatest sages in the generation would be part of this. And anytime there was any question anywhere, they would go through their local Besdin, which usually could be 3 people, sometimes more. If they couldn't make a decision and they were not clear, ultimately everything was brought before this Besdin, which is called Sanhedrin, 71 rabbis, and they would make the final decision. It all began with Moshe Rabbeinu, where it said that he had 70 elders. Elders doesn't mean old age. Elders means Torah scholars. So Moshe was one, and they were 70, altogether 71. And from that point on, this is where it all starts for us, when it comes to halacha. So there's a whole tractate with over 100 pages, all about Sanhedrin. So the subject of Mashiach, there's no tractate that's called Mashiach, which means it's totally about Mashiach. But there are different parts of Torah. In this tractate, you have a few lines here, in a different tractate, a few lines there. But if one would ask, where is there one place where it concentrates more on the subject of Mashiach, the answer would be in Tractate Sanhedrin. And it's on 2 or 3 pages. It starts with page 96, 97, and 98. And we're not going to do everything, but we're going to do a little bit, a few of the pages, so we can get some idea. And a lot of things are very complicated to understand because it's all written in, most of it is allegory, it's figurative, and not so clear what does it actually mean. But let's go through it and see where we can get. So as far as a Shas that's translated in English, there are basically 2. One which is done by Art Scroll, and one which is done by a rabbi, Steinsaltz in Israel. So this is called Koren. This is done by Rabbi Steinsaltz. It's his translation. And at the bottom of the page, it gives the reference where this is. So you look at the bottom, it says Sanhedrin 96b. You know what B and A means when it comes to Gemara? B, A, no. Pages. So what's 96?
96A, first page.
What?
96, first page.
96 is the page, and the A and the B?
Part 1 and part 2, no, the sides of the page?
The side, right. In other words, in Gemara, the number is only on one side. So it's either 96 side 1 or 96 side 2. So that's A and B. If you ever see it says a page number, and A means it's 96 on the first side. 96B is on the second side. In Hebrew or Yiddish, it'll always be 96 Aleph or Beis. So they made it to A and B. So this is where the subject of Mashiach begins. On the bottom, the last paragraph. Reb Nachman said to Rabbi Yitzchak, I'm going to read straight from the English. Have you heard when the son of giants will come? Now in the bracket it says the Hebrew, Bar Nifra. So some people translate it mean the son of giants. Some people also translate the word Nifla from the word Nafal in Hebrew, which means to fall. The son of the one that fell. Either way, he said to him, who is the son of giants? Or who's the one that fell? What kind of expression is that? Who are you referring to? So Rav Nachman said to him, he is Mashiach. So he said, you call Mashiach the son of giants? So again, according to this interpretation, that means giants. He's asking, why is that a reference to Mashiach? And according to the other translation, that means the one that fell, it surely wouldn't be Mashiach. Mashiach is a king. Mashiach is royalty in its highest place. Why would you refer to him as someone that fell? So he said, yes, I'll tell you why. There's a pasuk, there's a verse that says, on that day, I will establish, let's turn the page. I will establish Sukkah's David Hanofeles, the tabernacle of David that has fallen. You might recognize these words from benching. We just had the month of Tishrei, which has a holiday of Sukkot. And in Sukkot, we add a line in the benching. And the line is Harachman, which means Hashem. Yakum Lanu, he should stand up, he should rise, the fallen sukkah of King David. What does the sukkah mean? In this context, the sukkah means the dynasty, the royal dynasty of King David. That in itself is a question. Why are we referring to the royal dynasty of King David as a sukkah? The difference between a sukkah and a house is something which is of substance. It's a house. A sukkah is a hut. So that's also a discussion in the commentaries why. And the general way they explain it is when a house falls down and collapses, you got to start all over again, rebuild something new. A sukkah, meaning something which is like a little sukkah or a tent, it gets unfolded and you fold it together. It's not a big deal. I need to say, even though we don't have kings anymore, we don't have King David, his continued dynasty, but it didn't fall completely. And when Mashiach comes and it's put back and established, it's like picking up a tent that unfolded and you fold it together. It never really fell apart completely. That's what it means. Now the Gemara is going to start, but some of the things you're going to see are going to sound very frightening, but most of them are going to be things talking about what the world is going to look like when Mashiach comes. So the difference between now and past history, when the Jews were in Mitzrayim, they were actually, Abraham Avinu was given a number. Your children will be in Egypt for 400 years. We know that at the end it was 210 years, but they were given a number. The prophecy was they'll be there for 400 years. When the Jewish people were in Babylon, in that Geulah, there's open prophecies, they'll be there for 70 years. And after the 70 years are over, they'll go out of Geulah. Our Geulah now was never a time was given. And it's basically a Geulah that has we don't know the end to it. So even though a time wasn't given, but we were given a lot of signs and a lot of indications what the world will look like when that time comes. So when that happens, we'll be able to understand that now we're living in that time. And that's what the Gemara is going to describe now. I just want to stop for a second and ask the question, why? How come we weren't given a time? So one of the explanations of this in Chassidus is that we know that Geulah is not just a punishment. Geulah is a process of preparation. It's a process of refinement and cleansing that we should be ready to get what comes after Geulah, the good things. So for example, when the Jews were in Egypt, That was the preparation that we should be able to receive the Torah. When the Jews were in exile in the second generation, after the Babylonian time, it was to be able to receive whatever was given to them in the second Beis Hamikdash. And every time that we went to Golus, it was to something positive after that was supposed to come out of it. So what is this Golus about? This Golus is a preparation for the times of Mashiach. This is a process of refinement. The only question is like this. The amount of time that you're in Golus is in proportion to the good that's going to come out of it. Which means if the good that's going to come out of it is going to be so big, then the Golus has to be so long. If it's bigger, it has to be longer. The preparation and the refinement is in proportion to the end result, right? Being that this Geulah with Mashiach is eternal, it's forever, that would mean the Golus has to be forever. How could that be? Can't be forever. So this is one of the explanations why we were never given a time. When we're in Golus and we don't know when it'll ever end, in our minds, it's forever. In other words, when we know that something is going to be a very long time, but at the end of this long time, it'll end, and every day I'm getting closer to that end, it's easier to deal with. It feels like it's something limited. But if you were not given a time, and 100 years pass, and 200 years pass, and 1,000 years pass, and 1,400 years pass, and 1,500 years pass, the feeling as if it's something which is forever because you don't know when this will ever end. And that makes it a proper preparation for a Geulah, which will be for eternity, forever. So, even though you weren't given a time, but we were given signals, signs, what the world will look like. And here's where it begins. Let's see what it says. Hachi Amar, that's the Hebrew. This is what Rabbi Yochanan said. I'm reading from the top of page. You have two page numbers here. One is on the bottom, which is the page number of these books. And you also have the page number of the Gemara, the original. It says Daf 97. Do you see this over here? 97, Amud A, which means the first side. So it says, Rabbi Yochanan said, during the generation of which Moshiach, the son of David, comes, you know why it's called the son of David? Because he's a descendant of King David. Torah scholars will decrease. It won't be the way it used to be. And as far as the rest of the people, their eyes fail with sorrow and grief, and troubles increase. And the harsh decrees will be introduced before the first passes, the second quickly comes. Before the first suffering will end, a new one comes. So this is contrary to what most people imagine. Like if you ask somebody, do you feel comfortable with the idea that Mashiach is coming any moment? The reaction would be, come on, look what the world looks like. In other words, we're expecting that before Mashiach comes, it'll already be Mashiach bliss, everything will be beautiful. Mashiach will come, it'll be completely, and everything will be perfect. But the kind of problems we have today doesn't make you feel that Mashiach is coming. But when you look in the Gemara, you see just the opposite. That what's going to happen before Mashiach comes, actually things won't be so great. And therefore, the fact that we see things that are not so pleasant or worse than that is actually, if anything, one of the signs how we are in the times of Mashiach. So that's what it begins with. It says that people will be full of grief. Then it goes on to describe more specific. And some of this, we don't know exactly what it is. We just get the general idea, the general gist of it. Tanu Rabbanan, our sages taught, the next paragraph. They saw this in the Brisa. With regard to the 7-year period, the sabbatical cycle during which Mashiach, the son of David, comes. In other words, we know that according to Torah, every 7 years is a cycle. Just like every 7 days is the end of a week, every 7 years is the end of a cycle. And in Eretz Yisrael, at the end of the cycle, the 7th year is called a sabbatical year. That's called Shviyas, Shemitah. So before Mashiach comes, there's also going to be a cycle of 7 years. And here is it describes what will happen during that time. During the first year, this verse will be fulfilled. What's the verse? I will cause it to rain upon one city and cause it not to rain upon another city. Which means that there'll be famine, there'll be hunger in one place. Hello. But there won't be hunger in another place. One place will have hunger, another place will not have hunger. During the second year of that cycle, arrows of famine will be shot, indicating that there will be famine only in certain places. It'll be targeted in certain places. During the third year, there'll be a great famine, and men, women, children, the pious and men of action, unfortunately, will die, and the Torah is forgotten by those who study it. In other words, there's no longer too many people studying Torah. During the fourth year, there will be plenty, but not that much. In other words, now things are starting to go back up again. During the fifth year, there will be great plenty, and they will eat and drink and rejoice. And the Torah will return to those who study it. During the sixth year, there'll be heavenly voices heard. What did that mean, heavenly voices? We don't know. Some people say it doesn't mean voices, it means a lot of noise will be heard. Noise which is related to wars and all sorts of chaos going on in the world. During the sabbatical year, there'll be wars. The war of Gog and Magog will be waged. It'll involve the Jewish people. During the year after the conclusion of the sabbatical year, after the 7 years, that's when Mashiach will come. So Rabbi Yosef said, wait a second, haven't there been several sabbatical cycles? There were so many years where we saw people stop learning Torah, we saw wars, we saw all these things. So how come it didn't come yet? So Abaye answered him, the phenomena during the 6th year, heavenly voices, did you hear? During the sabbatical year, were there wars? And in general, all these things that you talk about that happened, did they happen in this order that's listed here? In other words, he said to him, it's only if it happens exactly, precisely in this order. This happens the first year, this happens the second year, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. Then you can expect that after that, it'll be Mashiach coming. But even though certain things happened, but it wasn't in this precise order. That's one thing. Then the Gemara goes on to another thing. The verse states, your enemies taunted Hashem. They've taunted the footsteps of Mashiach. What does that mean? It means that it'll come in a time where there'll be people, they'll be ridiculing Torah, ridiculing mitzvahs, making fun of Torah mitzvahs. And they'll also be making fun of the footsteps of Mashiach. We can identify with that there are people that are saying Mashiach is coming, and then we hear the footsteps and we're almost there, and there'll be people who'll be making fun of that, and not only making fun, but they'll actually be ridiculing the people who believe in these things. Then he goes on to say how things will deteriorate spiritually. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda says, during the generation that the son of David comes, by the way, this is also something which needs an explanation. Why does sometimes the Gemara say Mashiach? Sometimes they'll say the son of King David. Sometimes they'll say a different word, the son of Yishai. There's different expressions. They all mean Mashiach, but there must be a reason why sometimes this is used and sometimes something else is used. So during that time, the whole of the assembly of the sages will be designated for prostitution, which means these places were meant to be holy places, we'll see unholy things happening there. The Galil doesn't mean everything, but it means there'll be certain places like that. The Galil will be destroyed. And the Gavlan, there are different, nobody knows exactly who is the Gavlan, what is the Gavlan, will be desolate. The residents of border, which means the cities near the border in Israel, who flee the neighboring Gentiles will circulate from city to city, and they'll get no sympathy. They won't have where to live. The wisdom of scholars will diminish, and people who have fear of God will be despised. And the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. Why a dog? Meaning that the impudence and shamelessness and so on. Why specifically a dog? I don't know. No offense to anyone that has a dog, by the way, your dog is different. Yeah.
Are these all these prophecies, are they literal or just like?
Definitely not so literal. Some things could be literal. In other words, if I see something happening, which is exactly what it says here, I say, oh, it's literal.
Yeah.
But, and especially, I just want to add, especially when you're talking about negative things. The Rambam writes, and we're going to learn more about it, how if something is, he talks about the laws of prophecy. If something, I'm going to get to you in a second after this, unless it's a question that comes before this. So remind me after I finish. In the laws of prophecy, it says that when a prophet says something, we have a mitzvah to believe his words. And anyone who doesn't believe in the words of the prophet and doesn't observe it and follow it is violating the Torah. Unless he's not a true prophet, he's a false prophet. And how do you know that he's a false prophet? If he says that something's going to happen and it doesn't happen, he's a false prophet. Because a prophet is emes. But then the Rambam adds, it depends. If he gives a prophecy about something good that's going to happen and it doesn't, that proves he's a false prophet. If he prophesied that something bad is going to happen and it doesn't happen, that doesn't prove anything, because bad, Hashem could change it, and especially if we do tshuva or we do something, a certain merit, that could change even the bad. The proof is the famous story of Yonah that we read on Yom Kippur, and you had classes on this here, that here was a prophet that Hashem told him to go tell the people of Nineveh that within 40 days, the whole city will be destroyed. And he didn't want to go give the message. Eventually, he gave the message. They did tshuva, and it never happened. So we see that even if there's an open prophecy, it doesn't necessarily have to happen. So when you see something in the Gemara or the Medrash, or even verses in Tanakh, prophecies about negative things that are going to happen when Moshiach comes, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to happen literally. Because we could, through tshuva, through mitzvahs, reverse the situation, and it'll never happen. The positive thing that it says is definitely clear. Now, there's another thing. We should also refrain from sort of verbalizing and talking about the negative things, because that itself could give strength and substance to negative prophecies. So that's the answer. When we see something negative, either it's something which already happened and we can say, wow, this is exactly what happened. Or we can say it's not to be taken literally, and if we do Torah mitzvah properly, we can prevent all these negative things from happening. Yep. Still remember what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Okay.
I just didn't write it down so well. The years didn't have to happen in order.
Sequence?
Yeah.
The 7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't have to?
It did, yeah. That's what he said to him. It has to be a 7-year cycle. First this, then that. And it's all in one cycle of 7 years.
Do we know what year we are?
Where we are in that cycle? No.
No?
I don't even know if the cycle is, like you said, is everything is literal. It also could be metaphors. Especially when it talks about wars. We don't say, oh, there's going to be a war because it says here something about wars. We say just the opposite. Let's do, in fact, one of the main things that Rebbe always tells us is by doing mitzvahs, certain specific mitzvahs like tzedakah and others, we can prevent these things from happening in a literal sense. So they don't have to happen. There's a very interesting interpretation. I don't see him bringing it here, but in many other commentators, they do bring out this point. What does it mean? And it says this in a few places, that the leaders of the generation, the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. What kind of expression is that? So some, not some, more than some, a lot give this answer, that a dog has an interesting nature. When you're walking your dog, most of the time, the dog runs ahead of you, right? So who's leading, you or the dog? Because he's running ahead of you. But what does the dog do? When it comes to a place we have to turn, he turns around to see where you want to go. If you want to go to the right, so the dog goes to the right. If he sees you going to the left, the dog will go to the left. So is he leading or am I leading? So that's a dog. He runs ahead as if he's leading, but he doesn't really lead. He looks to look where you want to go, and that's where he leads you. And that's what it means that the leaders, a true leader, doesn't say, what's going to be popular? What do people like me to say? That's what I'm going to say. True leader knows what's emes, what's right, and he tells the people, this is the right thing to do, and this is the true thing to do. A leader that's not into true leadership, but just a leader, he wants to have the position of leadership, he wants to be popular, he's going to say what people want to hear, and that's going to be his thing. So in other words, it's saying that even the leaders will be corrupt. And I don't know if he's necessarily talking about Jewish leaders or general leader, but general people that are leaders, there'll be corruption there, that they'll be leading the wrong way. Well, the next page, 315. Emes Nederes. We'll see that the world will be lacking truth. There won't be many people. We learned about this the other day in Pirkei Avos about truth, emes. There won't be a lot of that, which means people won't be honest. And he who departs from evil is negated. In other words, if you see a person who's living a righteous life, people will look down at him. What is the meaning of the phrase, and truth is lacking? The sages of the study hall of Rav said, this teaches that truth will become like so many flock and walk away. Again, he does very little translation here, but in some place they explain that people who do stick to the truth, there'll be smaller groups, they'll stick together, because everybody else is going to look down at them because they're being truthful people and doing things the right way. The sages of the study hall, Rabbi Shila said, anyone who deviates from evil is deemed insane by the people, that people will look down at others who are Yerushalayim. A lot of these things we see it happening today. That's not a metaphor, unfortunately. And here comes the story that I told you yesterday. Was at the class that we had about emes, but here's the source of that story. Omer Rava said, initially, I would say that there is no truth anywhere in the world. But there was a certain one of the sages, his name was Reb Tavot. And some say Reb Tavyomet was his name. He was so honest that he said if they were to give him the entire world, he would not deviate from the truth of in his statement. And he said to me, one time I happened to come to a certain place, and the name of the place was Kushta, which means truth. That was the name of this community. And its residents would not deviate from the truth in their statements, which means that they were extremely meticulous about being honest and truthful. No person from that community would die prematurely. And I married a woman who was from that community. And he had 2 sons that were born with this marriage. One day, his wife was sitting and washing her hair, her head. Her neighbor came and knocked on the door. And he said he thought it's not proper to tell the neighbor that my wife is bathing now. He didn't feel it was appropriate. So he said to her, she's not here. I mean, the right way to say is basically she's not available. But he said she's not here. Since he deviated from the truth, his 2 sons died. We explained this yesterday, that Chas v'Shalom doesn't mean that if someone says a lie, God forbid there's such severe punishment, but these are great tzaddikim, and for them, it was, they're more sensitive, and apparently he was in a city that was super sensitive to lying. And therefore he lied, there was unfortunately consequences. The people who lived there came to him and said, what is the meaning of this? How did this happen? It doesn't happen in this city that people die prematurely. So he told them the story of what happened. They said to him, please leave our place and don't provoke premature death upon the people living here. So basically he left the city. But he said, after this incident, I'll never ever in my life say anything which is even an iota of deviating from truth. So this is in reference to the thing that when Mashiach comes, there'll be a lot of falsehood in the world. Again, that's also not a metaphor, unfortunately. One day, No, back to the next one. The Gemara resumes its discussion of what's going to be in the time of Mashiach, meaning before he comes. It's taught in a brisa. Rav Naraya said, during the generation in which the son of David comes, youth, meaning young people, will humiliate the older people. The older people will stand in deferences before the younger people. A daughter will rebel against her mother. A bride will rebel against her mother-in-law. And again, the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. And a son will not be ashamed of his father. So that means that we're going to see how the family sort of structure is going to fall apart. I remember once reading an article, but this is a long time ago, but not that things got much better since then, that this therapist is writing how years ago, family was the strongest and the best support system for a person. And unfortunately today, most people's problems come from family. So he gives this example. This is before we had cell phones. So people would make long distance phone calls. A long distance phone call costs a lot of money. So it's Thanksgiving or some other weekend, and there's an advertisement from the telephone company, 50% discount on any long distance phone call. And this girl gets excited, she's in college, she calls her parents, and she basically gets a discount of $30 that she had paid less for the long distance phone call. And then she pays $300 on therapy after the phone call. Like, they say we just had Thanksgiving where families come together. I mean, Baruch Hashem, there's still a lot of wonderful families in the world. But what you hear in the news is that this is a time where there are many fights going on because they don't usually sit by the table together. So often when they come together, they get into big arguments. We have this every Friday night. Shabbos day, we do all the same thing. Baruch Hashem, we don't need a answer. I remember someone who came to Crown Heights for one of these Shabbatons, and he decided that he wants to become more closer to Yiddishkeit, but he said what blew him away more than anything else, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was years ago when he came to the parents of Mrs. Ruddle's house, and he said, I was sitting by a table, parents and 10 children, and nobody's fighting, they're all singing together, they're talking together, they're enjoying each other. That blew me away completely. So when Mashiach comes, we're going to see a breakdown in the family the way it's supposed to be. And of course, the Rebbe always loves to translate things in a positive way. So he says, what does it mean that the younger people will go against the older people, which means the younger generation will be different than the older generation. The older generation went away from Yiddishkeit, but the younger generation, they're going to go back to Yiddishkeit. The father was like this, but the son is going to go back. The mother was like that, but the daughter is going to go back. And same with the daughter and a mother-in-law. Not chas v'shalom in other ways. We can do another paragraph here. So again, you get the gist of it, that we're not going to do all the things, because if we finish everything, you might say, oh, wait a second, do I really want Mashiach to come? So we're not going to do everything. But what you do get from here is the gist of it, that before Mashiach comes, in a way, there'll be certain things. There's no question there'll be a crazy, amazing, positive thing, but there'll also be, in some ways, more darkness than before. And we have to always remind ourselves, because we'll see things like that, like we just experienced, and we're still experiencing the end results of October 7th, and things that are similar to that. General things, personal things, even though we also see amazing positive things, but to understand that even the darkness that we see is part of the process. And we should always remember that this is very similar to what happened in Mitzrayim, that even though the Yidden were in Golus for so many years and they suffered and they cried out to Hashem, but that in itself was part of the process. And as they got closer to redemption, that in some ways their suffering got even worse. It was taught again in the Brisa. You see the word in the Hebrew Tanya, the same word like our book of Tanya. Tanya means it was taught in the Brisa, that's the source. Anyone know the difference between a brisa and a mishnah? Or brisa, Mishnah, and Gemara, all three?
Brisa is the addition to Mishnah, and part like the discussions of the.
Very good, yes. Mishnah is the original ruling, which could be usually very brief, a few lines. Gemara is where the Talmud, the sages, elaborate on the Mishnah. So when you open up a Talmud, a book of Talmud like this, you have a Mishnah. The Mishnah is a few lines, and then there can be 5, 10 pages explaining that small little Mishnah. That's the Gemara. What's the Brisa? The Brisa is somewhere in between. It's similar to a Mishnah, but more elaborate than the Mishnah. It came in a little bit later generation. And whenever it says Tanya, it means this was taught in a Brisa. That's what it's called. Brisa is an Aramaic word. Rabbi Nechemia says, during the generation that the son of David comes, arrogance will be in abundance. The cost of living will corrupt people, so they will engage in deceit. Because it'll be so hard financially, the vine will produce fruit, but nevertheless, the wine will be costly. The entire Gentile monarchy will be converted to the heresy of Christianity. There will be no inclination among the people to accept rebuke. People won't want to accept any guidance, any constructive criticism. The Brisa supports the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak, as Rabbi Yitzchak said, the son of David will not come until the entire kingdom will be converted to heresy. Again, it means all the leaderships in the world. Rava says, what is the verse which means where it says, and it all turned white. He is ritually pure. This is describing a mitzorah, somebody who has leprosy. One is a leper and ritually impure only if he has a leprous mark. However small, that makes him a mitzorah. But not if his skin is completely leprous. If he becomes white all the way, he's not impure, which is strange. If a little bit of white comes on the skin, he's impure. If the whole skin turns white, he's not impure. But similarly, the world will be redeemed and only when the Jewish people reach the lowest point, which means not a little bit of corruption or a little bit of degeneration, but God forbid, on a large scale. But that will be the indication that Mashiach is coming. One more piece. The sages taught in a Brisa, for Hashem shall judge his people and atone for his servants when he sees that their power is gone and there's none up or left. What does that mean? It means that the son of David will not come until informers will proliferate. That there'll be a time, according to Torah, this is actually the next thing we're going to be learning in Pirkei Avos, is about this, that according to Torah, you're not allowed to inform against another fellow Jew. We know the Alter Rebbe was arrested because other Jews filed a false accusation against him. That's altogether unacceptable. But even if it's true, imagine someone, you have a landlord, he's not giving you steam. So you have a complaint. What do? You call up the authorities in the city and you say he's not giving me steam. That is a prohibition according to Torah. So what are you supposed to do? A Jew's first step is to go to a Bezdin, a court of rabbis. If the person is a God-fearing Jew, he'll listen to the court of rabbis and he'll do what they'll tell him to do, which is the right thing to do. But what if he doesn't listen to them? Then the court of rabbis will give you the green light to go to the secular courts or to do whatever has to be done in the government agency to force him to do what he's supposed to do. But initially, if you do go to the secular courts, or you go to a government agency instead of going to rabbis, that's considered an informer. Before Mashiach comes, we're going to see a lot of that people choose to go to the non-Jewish authorities rather than going to the Torah authorities, which this is, in a certain way, one of the worst kinds of violations of Torah, because you're basically saying, I choose something else over Hashem's system. So before Mashiach comes, we're going to see a decline in that people won't respect the Torah Rabbanim. The next one's an interesting one, and you might have heard about it recently, and that is Mashiach will come when the pruta will cease from the purse. Pruta is the lowest coin. Like in America, pruta would be a penny. In Israel, it's actually called a pruta. In other countries, it has another name. The reason why it's interesting is because recently the President of the United States decided that he's going to stop pennies, no more pennies. The other coins and dollar bills, but no more pennies. So people said, oh, there's a sign that when there's no more pennies, really it means when people will be in poverty. You won't have any, you won't even have pennies in their pockets. But it was an interesting observation. Another thing is, Mashiach won't come until people will actually despair. They'll give up hope that there'll be redemption. That's also, we can say, unfortunately, is literal. And that's where the Rebbe is fighting so hard that we shouldn't, chas v'shalom, be cold to the idea, but to realize that Mashiach is coming soon and strengthen our emunah. Because there's a pasuk that says, people will say these words, and there is no one, I don't know whether they're saying shut up or left. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, this translation. It means as if though there's no supporter, nobody help, nobody we could rely on, that we're going to be having salvation. So another thing which is a sign, again, that Mashiach is coming, when you see that people, and it's so low and so distant, so difficult, that people will even give up hope that Mashiach will come. Again, it doesn't mean, like they once asked somebody, don't you realize that it's a wrong thing to give up hope on Mashiach? Says, no, that brings Mashiach closer. Because it says that when you give up hope, that's a sign Mashiach is coming. So if I give up hope, maybe that'll make him come sooner. In the other place, it says Mashiach will come when people have a lot of chutzpah. So I'll have a lot of chutzpah. That's not the way it works. It's saying that that's going to be the sign, but not chas v'shalom. That's what we need to do. Okay, so we'll stop here. I want to wish everybody a good Shabbos and enjoyable Shabbos. To be continued. Okay.
We'll be right back.